Namah Shivaya. I'm Nirmala and I'm at the Shivananda Yoga Vedanta Center in South Delhi in Kailash Colony. And wanted to share a little bit today, bit perspective on teaching and our own practice as well. So here at the center, of course, we teach beginners on a regular basis in our courses, but we had a chance this week to reflect on something a little different, which is that sometimes when we come to yoga when we're new, we don't quite know what is the difference between pain and sensation. And it's quite common sometimes for students to say, I'm feeling pain. And even in the practice, sometimes you see them, you ask them to do something and they sort of grimace in pain a little bit. So it's something to think about. And I often find myself telling the students, we have to actually learn a little more about the body so that we can better differentiate what is pain and what is sensation. So I think this is quite an important question in the practice, actually. And so I'll give an example. A student told me this week that actually when I'm not in yoga class, I'm lying in bed, and I'm always lying in bed. So definitely if we go from a lot of inactivity into something else, like our yoga practice, then definitely we're going to feel a little more in the body. But is that actually pain? And I can't, as a teacher, judge whether somebody from the outside, whether they're feeling pain or not. I might have to say to them, go to your doctor and check. I might ask them a little more about exactly what they feel, but I think sometimes we don't know what we feel. So this is a very important question. And sometimes we have a perspective to push really hard in the practice and try to go beyond something. And then other people and other situations, we tend to hold back a little bit when perhaps we should be pushing a little bit more. So there's a lot to think about. There's a quotation by Lao Tzu, actually. He says, nature never hurries, yet everything is accomplished. So we can actually understand that in the practice, something natural is happening to us, and we can accomplish what we want without perhaps pushing too hard. So I'll introduce a couple of concepts here. The first is interoception, and that means our own internal, that's paying attention to our own internal feelings, sensations, and signals. So we get signals from inside, whether things are okay or not okay, whether it's okay to proceed or not to proceed, but sometimes we're a little out of touch with those internal signals. So this is the internal state of the body. And when we're not really tuned into that internal state, then we tend to have a kind of poor body image. We tend to feel negatively sometimes about our external body appearance. And so definitely when we practice yoga, we're building up our ability to read these internal signals. So this is helpful. And then another term is proprioception, and this is relative to my own. So it's how I sense the external world. So how it could be temperature, it could be pain, it could be vibration, sensation, touch that I like or touch that I don't like coming from outside, a sense of where my body is in the space relative to other things. And so this is generally what when we say body awareness, we generally mean proprioception. And so we're getting feedback from our peripheral nervous system, which helps us to understand ourselves within the external world as well. So when we're practicing, it can be helpful to have a sense of these two things, the internal and the external. Stretching. So here's another word that's quite important. So when we stretch, sometimes to know whether we're stretching too much or not enough, we can look at how do I feel after I stretch. Do I feel less powerful after the stretch? Do I feel a little weak in some way? Then let's say I stand up and I don't feel quite as firm or as strong as I did before. That can be a sign that we're pushing too much, actually. And definitely, for many people, when we stretch to our full extent, 100%, we start to feel bone against bone. And this is not very helpful either. There's nowhere we can go if the bone is reaching the bone. So there's another word here that can be helpful, pendiculation. This is, when we get up in the morning, that initial sort of stretch that we have, or if we see a cat or a dog stretching, when we pendiculate, we're not going to our full extent. we're sending messages to the spinal cord, but we're preparing ourselves to move actually. And so we're preparing ourselves to be strong and to move forward. So that taking that awareness of pendiculation into the practice, I can understand that where I want to be perhaps is somewhere in between those two things. We tend to, as teachers, tell students, don't push yourself too much, but then we tell our own self in our own practice to push harder, and we tend to think that's the way to be. So we have a lot of ideas about where I should be in the practice. So I really need to examine what is pain, and am I having pain? So these are important questions. And pain is a human experience, so there are so many things that relate to our experience of pain. Our own past experiences, maybe I was injured or I felt some kind of trauma in doing something. My expectations for what I should be feeling. Maybe I look around and I see what other people seem to be feeling, and that tells me whether to strive or to push more. What I've been told about the practice, other stressors that I have in life. So generally, if I feel any sense of threat or lack of safety, I tend to be more likely to experience pain. So it's something to think, am I safe? Do I feel safe in this practice? Do I feel safe in the environment that I'm in? So we should always create, as teachers, a safe place for people to practice in so that we're not triggering their fear in any way. And part of the practice naturally is doing that. We're letting go of fears in different ways. It's a wonderful opportunity to do that and learn about ourselves a little more. So just a few thoughts today on pain and sensation. I hope that you better differentiate between the two in your practice. And I wish you all the best with your yoga practice. Om Namah Shivaya.